My son rejected me because I was a dropout. You won't believe what happened next. Could you please skip the wedding? Honestly, having a high school dropout there would be embarrassing. I never imagined my own child would say something like this to me. Where did I go wrong? Was it my upbringing, my lack of education, or has my son lost his way? My mind blanked, and it felt like something inside me shattered. My name is Anastasia, and I'll be turning 45 this year. My life has been anything but smooth. When I was 7, my parents died in a tragic accident. They were in a bike crash, and by the time I reached the hospital, it was too late. I don't recall much from that time. What stayed with me more than the sadness was the unbearable sense of being abandoned. My grandparents and relatives handled the funeral arrangements. I just sat there, clutching the doll my dad had given me and wearing the ribbon my mom had made. I was motionless, like a statue. Soon after, I moved in with my aunt and uncle. Living with them was awkward. We weren't close, and I couldn't see them as my real parents. The emotional distance between us only grew. On top of that, the relationship was strained, and the tension at home was suffocating. Although I was grateful they took me in, I never truly felt at ease. By the time I was finishing middle school, I wanted out. I chose not to continue to high school and started working instead. My aunt and uncle didn't protest. In fact, they seemed relieved. I found a job at a factory that hired school dropouts and even provided accommodation. The work was grueling, sorting pants, unloading shipments, and other physical tasks. But also, it was there that I met Daniel. He was 2 years older and became my mentor at work. "Anastasia, you're always so hardworking," he said one day. At 16, I had never been praised like that before. Growing up, neither teachers nor family had ever acknowledged my efforts. But Daniel's words struck a chord, and we quickly grew close. We married when I turned 20. Daniel was my rock. He genuinely loved me, filling the void of loneliness I had carried for so long. His parents were kind too, never once making me feel inferior because I hadn't finished school. "You've been through so much. It's amazing how far you've come," they would say. A year later, our son Ethan was born. But after his birth, my health began to deteriorate. Frequent dizziness and fatigue made it hard to keep up with the demanding factory job. I requested a transfer to a less physically demanding role, but there were no openings for me in the larger army of people who need more scheduling than I could provide with my wearisome colleagues in the field I was retiring from. My manager explained. There was an option to move to another location, but it was over an hour away, and commuting wasn't feasible with a newborn at home. After discussing it with Daniel, I decided to leave the job I had held for 8 years. "You've worked hard enough, Emily. Take a break." "I'll take care of things," Daniel reassured me. True to his word, Daniel worked tirelessly to provide for us. He even helped with housework and childcare, knowing how fragile my health had become. But our happiness was short-lived. When Ethan was 4, Daniel fell ill and passed away. Overwhelmed by grief, I also felt an immense sense of responsibility. Daniel was gone, and raising Ethan alone now fell solely on me. Desperate, I began searching for work, but with no qualifications and my dropout status, I was turned away repeatedly. Full-time jobs were out of reach, so I settled for part-time work inspecting food products at a factory. My income, combined with Daniel's inheritance and various allowances, allowed us to scrape by. Thankfully, our mortgage was covered by personal credit insurance. Daniel's parents offered financial help, but I declined, knowing their resources were limited. They had been so supportive of Daniel and me, and I wanted them to enjoy their later years without added burdens. From then on, it was just Ethan and me. My life revolved entirely around him. I never wanted him to feel deprived or alone. If he wanted to attend a baseball game, we'd go to the major leagues. If he needed extra tutoring, I made sure he got it. Whatever he dreamed of, I did my best to make it happen. Without a father, I poured all my love into Ethan. I worked part-time jobs and took on side gigs to make ends meet. Over 15 years, I managed to save $30,000. When Ethan announced he wanted to go to college, We made it work, thanks to Daniel's inheritance, my savings, and, most importantly, Ethan's scholarship. His academic brilliance shone through, and he earned accolades for his research papers. "Great job, Ethan," I would tell him, always encouraging him. Though he seemed bashful, I could see the pride in his eyes. But over time, Ethan's confidence morphed into arrogance. "People are so dumb," he'd say dismissively. "That guy acts like he's smart, but he's nowhere near my level." I tried to correct him. "Ethan, that's not a kind thing to say." "Mom, you don't get it. Intelligence is what really matters in this world. People like me are right," he retorted. Even his tone toward me began to shift. I chalked it up to youthful arrogance, thinking he'd grow out of it. But one evening his words stunned me. "So, where did Dad and you go to college?" he asked casually over dinner. "Your dad graduated high school, but I didn't." I replied honestly. "What? You dropped out? Are you serious? That's so embarrassing," he said, his face twisting in disdain. He had never discussed our educational backgrounds with him before, so his reaction caught me off guard. But the way he looked at me, with such contempt, is something I'll never forget. "How do you even have the right to tell me what to do? You're just a dropout. I can't see you as my mother anymore." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Ethan, watch your tone. Shut up. Don't talk back to me, you dropout." His voice thundered through the house, every word sharper than the last. From that day forward, he seized every opportunity to demean me for not finishing school. "Ha, so because you dropped out, you couldn't even manage a decent career? Isn't that just pathetic? Don't you envy someone like me, a successful college graduate?" At first, I tried to correct him, but Ethan refused to budge. Over time, I stopped arguing. Not long after he landed his first job, he moved out. Whenever I reached out, he kept our conversations short, cutting the call abruptly. I eventually decided to stop calling, hoping that one day he'd reflect and realize his mistakes. I believed that time would soften his heart. And then, out of the blue, he reported to inform me he'd put cancer treatment for the first time and said I replaced his old modifier. And then, out of the blue, he called Asher. I hadn't seen my son in ages. Excited, I immediately agreed. When he arrived, he seemed like a different person, cheerful and radiant. But he wasn't alone. A stunning young woman accompanied him. "This is Sarah," he introduced her with pride. "She's my senior at work, and we're on the same promotion track. We're planning to get married." The news took me by surprise, but happiness quickly followed. "That's wonderful. Congratulations." Sarah smiled nervously. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. I look forward to being part of your family." "Oh, Sarah, no need to be so formal. We're family now. Just call me Mom," I said. "Doing the same as Mom," said Viola. She replied, her smile growing more genuine. They didn't stay long, but their visit left me overjoyed. Ethan, my only child, was taking a big step toward building his own family. Despite everything, I still cherished him as Daniel's legacy, but my optimism was short-lived. Later that same day, Ethan called me. "Don't say anything unnecessary to Sarah," he began. "What do you mean?" "You know, about your dropout background or those embarrassing jobs you did. Just keep it to yourself." I froze, stunned by his audacity. "Ethan, this isn't right. You shouldn't think this way." "Shut up. Your opinion doesn't matter. You're just a dropout." With that, he hung up. Nothing had changed. If anything, his attitude had grown worse. Where did I go wrong? The question lingered in my mind, tormenting me. One afternoon, Sarah visited again. She noticed the yarn scattered on the table. "Do you knit as a side job, Mom?" she asked, curious. "Sort of," I replied hesitantly. "I'm not very skilled, though." "That's amazing. I've always wanted to try, but I'm terrible with my hands." "If you'd like, I can teach you," I offered. "Really? That would be wonderful." Her enthusiasm brought warmth to my heart. We began meeting regularly, knitting and even exploring fabric stores together. Sarah felt like the daughter I never had, kind, thoughtful, and genuine. But as the wedding day approached, my worries grew. Was Sarah truly happy with Ethan? Could she handle the side of him I knew all too well, the way he treated his own mother? Would that extend to her someday? Should I tell her the truth? Or would that be overstepping as a mother? These thoughts consumed me daily. Then, just 2 weeks before the wedding, Ethan came over unexpectedly. "Mom, I don't want you at the wedding," he declared bluntly. "What are you talking about?" I asked, bewildered. "It's embarrassing. You're a dropout." "I'd rather have my uncles take the parents' seats." "They're not your parents, Ethan." "That's absurd. Don't make me repeat myself. Just disown me already." Having a dropout for a mother is a stain on my life. The boy standing before me no longer felt like my son. "Fine, if that's what you want, I'll stop considering you my son," I replied calmly. "Whatever," he sneered. "I'll inform Sarah—" "No, don't," he panicked. Ignoring his protests, I dialed Sarah's number. "Hi, Sarah, it's me," I began. "Is everything okay?" she asked, sensing something was wrong. "Ethan doesn't want me at the wedding. He's embarrassed by my background." "What? Why?" "Because I'm a dropout. Are you sure you want to marry someone so prejudiced?" I could sense Sarah was at a loss for words on the other end of the call. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Ethan shouted angrily, his voice shaking the room. I met his gaze, calm and unflinching. "Give me the phone," he barked, snatching it out of my hand. "Sarah, wait, this isn't—" "Ethan, I've heard enough," she interrupted coldly, cutting him off before hanging up. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the phone, unable to comprehend what had just happened. "This is my house," I said firmly, breaking the silence. "You need to leave." Still stunned, Ethan had no choice but to comply. Sometime after the confrontation, Sarah arrived at my home with her family, catching Ethan by surprise as he was hurriedly packing up his belongings. She had something serious to discuss, so we all sat down in the living room. "I assumed you already knew, but I guess I should make it clear myself. I'm also a dropout." Ethan's face turned pale. It was obvious he had never considered the possibility. Because Sarah was his senior at work and incredibly capable, he had assumed she was a college graduate, just like him. Sarah went on to explain how she had lost both of her parents by the time she was in junior high and was raised by her elderly grandparents. With financial struggles weighing heavily on her, she had no choice but to leave school early to work and support herself. Luckily, her company valued her skills and didn't judge her based on formal education. "I'm appalled by your behavior, Ethan," Sarah said, her voice steady but laced with anger. Her family shared her sentiment, with her uncle, John, sternly rebuking him. "You've disgraced yourself. How could you treat the woman who raised you with such contempt? Do you even realize the sacrifices she made for you?" Ethan, who was rarely reprimanded by anyone, sat in stunned silence, his usual arrogance shattered. "I can't marry someone like you," Sarah declared firmly. "Consider the engagement canceled." "Wait, Sarah, don't do this." "I love you," Ethan begged, his desperation clear, but John intervened. "This conversation is over, Ethan. Our family won't let Sarah marry someone so ungrateful and prejudiced. We'll split the wedding cancellation costs." Ethan didn't argue further. He simply sat there, defeated, his gaze unfocused. "I'm so sorry for everything," I said softly to Sarah. "Please, don't apologize, Emily," she replied. "I've always admired your strength and kindness. Can we still stay in touch? I'd love to keep learning from you." "Of course," I said, touched by her words. Although Sarah and Ethan went their separate ways, she and I continued to see each other. As for Ethan, I cut all ties. Months later, he came to my house unannounced. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, bowing his head in shame. "Eat," I said, my voice firm. "Some mistakes can't be undone. To me, you're no longer my son." Tears streamed down his face, but I felt no sympathy. All that remained was a hollow emptiness. It's heartbreaking to me to have made such a hollow excuse for not having time for my children. Mary, it's so good to see you, she said warmly. We're taking things slow, but it feels right, he said with a smile. Sounds wonderful, I replied. By the way, do you know how Ethan's doing? Sarah hesitated before answering. Word about why we broke up spread through the company. People stopped trusting him, and he was demoted to a meaningless position. He deeply regrets how he treated you. That's unfortunate, I said, emotionless, but it's too late now. Ethan came by once more, begging for forgiveness. Mom, please give me another chance, he pleaded. But my heart remained unmoved. It's over, Ethan. Go and live your life. Since then, I've remarried. My husband, David, has brought a new light into my life, offering me unconditional love and acceptance. The hardships you've endured have only made you stronger, he once said. Let's create a future full of happiness together. I'm truly at peace now, cherishing every day. Perhaps this happiness is a gift from Daniel, watching over me from above. As for Ethan, I no longer consider him my son. The boy I once knew, the child I sacrificed so much for, feels like a distant memory. I wonder if he ever truly existed, or if he was simply a painful lesson in life. And so, the final lesson I leave for Ethan is this: choices have consequences, and some wounds can never be healed.